Let's stay with education. If you, like many parents, are tearing your hair out at the thought of your child being out of school for another 4 weeks, our next guest may have some advice for us. I'm joined now by author, broadcaster and former host of ETV's parenting show Great Expectations, Sam Cowen. Good evening, Sam. Always lovely to chat. When you heard that the reopening of schools was going to be delayed, what were your first thoughts?
You know, I'm going to go completely against trend. I was fine about it. The kids are missing school. They're sorry that they're not going back. But there's something about teenage kids versus little kids that you have to entertain all the time and keep busy all the time. And they can self-regulate. We are really fortunate. I listened to that whole segment. And, you know, having internet and not having internet is now the difference between a great education and no education. And it's absolutely wrong. And I apologize for the cat in advance in the picture. He's desperately trying to become the Pampers front page, but he hasn't made it just yet.
Allow the cat full screen. We love cats on the show.
There we go. Yeah, it's your debut, Seamus. You want to eNCA. Yeah.
I mean, this is the reality, though, Sam, that we've all had to get used to, is online learning for middle-class South Africans. Online communication is not that difficult. It's a pain. No. It can be stressful at times, but it's possible. Whereas, as you were saying, what Michael has just told us is that kids in rural areas are at a massive disadvantage. But I think also for parents, you know, just because we're not in that terribly disadvantaged situation, it's nonetheless less very challenging and very, very difficult. I'm wondering if it's harder for the parents or the kids. I know that through the books that you've written about children, about parenting, about schooling, from Waiting for Christopher to The Good Enough Mother to Brutal School Ties, you've spoken to so many children, parents, educators. Who's having it toughest, do you think?
Well, funnily enough, I think educators are having it toughest. You know, some of these teachers have been teaching a certain way since the year dot, and saying, well, everyone's got to change, everyone's got to innovate is a lot easier when you're 12 or 13, because those kids pick up stuff so fast. They pick it up so fast. And my two were into online learning within a week. I'm not talking about the trauma of not seeing their friends, which is a very first world thing, but I think educators have it hardest. I really feel for parents whose kids are younger, because when they get to a certain age, you can pop them in their bedrooms, maybe check every now and again to make sure they actually are on the iPad or the computer, and definitely stay in touch with the teachers, you know, making sure that they're doing their lessons. But for educators, they're coming in blind, a lot of them, into a world of technology that they're not used to having to keep attention on a class they can't even see. So I have a lot of sympathy for them, and I have a lot of sympathy for parents of kids sort of from about 10 down who are busy and their attention spans are short. And when you have to work from home and hold down a job and have serious meetings, I've just had a cat tail across the screen there, but when you've got a screaming child and you're trying to make huge decisions, especially under a lot of pressure, that's really, really tough. So I've got a lot of feeling for them too. Like I said, I think the kids are really adaptable. Children are far more adaptable than we ever believe them to be.
Sam, how did you get through the homeschooling in 2020? I'm wondering if you've got any special hacks, because one of the things that we've been saying in our newsroom is this is not our first rodeo. We've been through this last year. We've got to have learnt stuff on how we can get through more disruptions this year. Do you have any hacks for us?
So a few things that we tried was, I didn't make the kids get dressed every single day, you know, top to toe. I said, you've got to be dressed from the waist up, and from the waist down, you better be wearing something. But I made it a game. You know, they were allowed to have snacks. They were allowed to take their breaks and chill out in the kitchen. There were certain teachers who were very relaxed. If the child was making a cup of tea while the lesson was on, so long as they could see them on screen, they were happy with that. There were a couple of times I caught both children offline and pretending that they were online, that their screens had gone down, that their internet connection was unstable, so I outed them in front of the teachers. Feel no guilt about doing that. Those teachers have seen it all the time. Yell out in a nice piercing voice, "Darling, why isn't your screen on?" And you'd be astounded at how fast that internet connection stabilizes. And I think for parents especially, let it go. We worry so much about what our kids are missing. Well, they're missing what we think they're missing. You know, they're missing what we decide they're missing. If the syllabus needs to adjust, it needs to adjust. If the syllabus needs to change a little bit, it needs to change a little bit. If they go to school on the holidays, well, then they do. It's a pandemic. This is not normal living. And just to go with the flow as much as you possibly can. As an A-type personality, if I learned anything from 2020, watching my two kids adapt and get on with things. And, you know, I've got a matric this year, hey, Sally.
Oh, boy.
You know, the waiting for Christopher of Christopher is a matric. And this is a really hectic year. And it's a lot of firsts and lasts. And we're working with that, going, okay, well, how are we going to do this year where you might not even be at school for a lot of it? And how are we going to manage that and make sure it's a really special year from a socially distanced perspective? Because right now, the reason I'm sitting in my bedroom isn't just because I'm sitting in my bedroom because it's nice here. I'm sitting here because I've just had a negative COVID test, but I've been in isolation for 10 days.
Yeah, and that's what those are the realities we're having to roll with. And
they are.
When you say that Christopher is now in matric this year, and your book Waiting for Christopher was all about your pregnancy and informed so much of what we did on Great Expectations, it's just astonishing. But while we're on, you know, you made such a good point about mothers and fathers not being too tough on themselves and not trying to be absolutely perfect in these incredibly unsettling times. But dare I ask, without any teenagers watching, perhaps rolling their eyes, have you had any or found any teachable moments for your kids, or perhaps even for yourself, during the pandemic?
Well, quite a few. I think the biggest one was them seeing exactly what it meant for people who did not have access to schooling, who didn't have access to food. You know, every now and again, as much as you can't drum into your kids how lucky they are, because for them everything's relative. It's like privilege. It's not privilege if you've grown up that way. It's normal, even though it's privilege for people who have not grown up that way. But it's about an awareness of it and about how lucky you are. And I think some of the teachable moments have been making sure that they have known that while we are still great, that those food parcels are going out. If we're not hungry, no one else is going hungry, as far as we possibly can. And when it goes, and going back to the kids themselves, never underestimate the adaptability and the power and the strength of a young person who's thinking. You know, I watched my kids have some of the most terrifying experiences. You know, when you think about people of our age, you know, the youth of our age, Sally. But we know of death. We've all experienced death. For some of these kids, they've never seen it or had it. The first friend that got COVID, and everyone was panicking that person was going to die. You know, how do you make sure that the people that you love know that you love them? So, I mean, both of my kids, I was like, I love you every day, because we don't know how many days there are. We don't know how much sand there is in the glass. But to make it an uplifting thing, and not to keep trying to drum into them that life is terrible and this is everything as we knew it is gone, because everything as they know it every year is gone. You know, they're constantly learning new things, and we need to be a bit more like that. Obviously, and as somebody who's just had 7 days of people making my food and dropping it off outside the bedroom door, I mean, I haven't played my music really loud or told anybody that they don't understand me, but I've just lived the teenage life. It's not a bad one.
Well, thank you. Always so lovely to chat to you. That is author, broadcaster, and former host of ETV's parenting show Great Expectations, Sam Cowen, and her cat, speaking to us this evening. Still